how are we to read the book of Revelation? When we approach the book, what's the best way to approach that book of the Bible?
All right.
Every book in the Bible should be read in terms of who wrote it and who they were writing to. And the one thing we all know is they weren't writing to you.
Right.
They weren't writing to me. The Bible certainly is for all people and can be used for all people, but it is not this magical book that means something different to every one of us. That's not what God's intent. These are letters, particularly the New Testament, that are written to specific people. And the way to understand the letters is to understand what the author's intent was to the people he was writing to. And then maybe once I understand what he was trying to say to them, there might be a meaning for me at something in my life that corresponds to that in some way. But you cannot start by thinking someone in the first century wrote something intended to reveal something in the 21st century or somewhere deep in the future. None of them were thinking that way, and I don't think that's the way God intended it to be read either.
Right.
I don't either.
Well, and I think one good way of thinking about it is, at the beginning of the book of Revelation, John says who specifically he's writing to, these pastors in these 7 churches. And so that's the context. And all of us get to listen in on their conversation. But, very way often we want to read things. I want to be able to take a verse or even just an entire book and say, this is an abstract truth that's supposed to tell me specifically how to live my life, as he was saying. But that would be as if I was writing a letter to Ed about a specific problem in his life, and Jason ends up reading that letter. Now, there are things Jason can be encouraged by in the letter. Let's say Ed's sick, and so I'm writing to him and saying, hey, or this specific case, we can't be physically together, and I'm writing to him about stuff going on with COVID, and I'm talking to him about it. And then 30 years later, Jason picks it up, and this whole COVID thing's taken care of, and Jason reads it. But for him to just read it and go, well, I'm going to take this and this is about me, would be ridiculous because I was writing a letter to him. But if he can remember, hey, 30 years ago when he wrote this, that whole coronavirus thing was going on. Nathan must have been saying encouragement to him based on this. Well, there is some encouragement I can take from that. Yes. But it's only through the lens of Nathan writing to his dad during this crisis, all of the context surrounding it. And we have to do the same when we're reading any part of the Bible.
It's always been interesting to me when I heard people try to figure out, interpret the book of Revelation, is they interpret all different kinds of meanings into all these different images that is used in the book, except they often don't look at the images that were being used in the day and time of the writing of the book. Like, there are things that he makes reference to that really were happening in the first century in those days, and the people who would have read it would have said, oh, I know exactly who that is. It's written in a little bit of a cryptic kind of way because, and we just got through talking about this before we went on the air, John is writing to a group of Christians and mostly Jewish Christians, people who've come out of Judaism, using images that they would have completely understood, but the Romans, who are the government that's overseeing and persecuting the church, if they had intercepted a letter like that, would have read and probably not understood everything that. So he intentionally is making it cryptic for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, when you're under persecution, so that's the first thing I'd want people to know is this is a book written in persecution to other people in persecution. So John's in prison for his faith, writing to people who are afraid of going to prison or who have had family members killed for their faith. And I've heard from a bunch of missionary friends of mine in other parts of the world where there is active persecution that the book of Revelation is one of the favorite books in those countries because it's written to people in persecution. Yes. And it makes total sense to them, not about some far-off kind of pictured thing that nobody really understands. It's concrete. It's about what is happening. So here's John. He's writing to people in persecution, and he tells you who he's writing to right up front. He's a guy who started churches in Asia Minor, and he says, I'm writing this to the angels, which is the same word for the pastors or the messengers. He's writing to the messengers of 7 distinct churches. It isn't something we don't understand. They all knew who he was writing to. So if you read it in the context of, I know it was written to those people, they're in persecution, it's a pastor who loves these people, probably what he's saying to them is encouragement somehow, not about, hey, I know you're not going to get this because I'm really not writing it to you. It's going to be for some people in the 21st century, so hold on to it, take good care of it because they're going to really need it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. In fact, that would be very bad pastoring.
It would be
It
terrible.
would be very bad pastoral.
And they'd go, thank God he's in prison and we get a new pastor.
That'd be like one of us standing up, speaking a message and saying, now, you're not going to get this, but if y'all will take care of this message, in about 1,000 years, it's going to make sense to them.
Yes.
Exactly.
Or someone's in dire need of something. They're in an illness and they go, Nathan, I really need encouragement. And I go, 2,000 years from now.
Yes.
You're a great, and then I speak into that. And it doesn't mean, once again, that there's no truth, but these images, they meant specific things to those people.
That's what, and then we'll move on to another part of this, but that's why it bothers me always. People say, well, I get it, but maybe it can mean something else too. Well, that might be true, but it's one of the things that causes us to lose credibility with people who don't already buy into the Bible, because everybody goes, when you go this thing, and I'll say to people, lots of people, oh, I know, people have been wrong, they've been wrong, they've been wrong. They're wrong, and you're probably going to be wrong about this because you're reading the book wrong to begin with, and it's hard to get to a right answer with a wrong start.
Yeah, and like you and I have said, it's very tough when we've lived long enough and done ministry long enough to know that this kind of talk has come around at least 4 or 5 times in our lifetime, of people saying, oh, this right here, what's happening in our world right now, that's in the book of Revelation. And then when we get past it, like Y2K, we get past it and everybody goes, okay, let's move to the next thing. And then the watching world looks at us and goes, now, which one is it?
Yeah, and why should I believe you about this thing about Jesus being resurrected when everything you just told me turned out not to be true? The church is founded on a historical fact, and if that's historically true and we want to hold on to that, us making up these interpretations for other things do nothing but do us damage.
Yes.
And so we have to read the book correctly.